over again, you know that that's the forum that you cannot miss, and your passion and dedication is absolutely fantastic, Joanne. Thank you for letting us be here. I also had the privilege working with Joanne and Andrea Edwards of Franklin Covey in some very creative planning to make this whole week come together. And for those of you who were here this morning and this afternoon, I think you would agree that the organisation and the topics continue the fantastic, enlightened forums that have been the hallmark of building sustainable communities. So let me get to the business of the evening around the debate. I'm an educator, excuse me, and it's in that context that I agreed to take on the role of moderator for the debates. I'm dedicated to the pursuit of disseminating knowledge, of seeking understanding and engaging in activities that will both reduce unsustainability and promote sustainability, and those are two different but very related parts of the same equation. And as we prepared for this debate, I corresponded with the four presenters and Joanne and suggested a format that includes some basic ground rules. I propose to the audience and the debaters, please be respectful, keep it clean, avoid obscene and antagonistic interactions, and be truthful. Do not knowingly lie or mislead. I've asked that each of the four presenters make a 10-minute presentation, and in the order I had asked Joel to begin, followed by Kent, with Robert, and then Thierry. If they each do 10 minutes, then I thought that one of the things that we would do is give them an additional 5 minutes after that to respond to anything they've heard or make any additional commentary. I then prepared 3 questions that I want to begin the conversation and interaction around the debate, and then open it up to the floor. So with your permission, if that's okay, I just want to begin. I spent a lot of time trying to understand the issue, not in the context of GMO pro and con, but in the context of how debates about the issues of GMOs and sustainability and biotechnology have taken place. A number of those debates I found to be fascinating, trying to get the balance between the pros and the cons. In a second, I'll introduce to you the 4 presenters and their backgrounds. I'm stalling just a tiny little bit because one of the 4 presenters missed his flight this afternoon and was rushed on a WestJet flight and is on his way to the forum right now. Happens to be my colleague Kent Mullenix. So this, and hopefully the irony won't be lost on you. He has a Missourian drawl, and I'm trying to do the Scottish drawl just to make this last a tiny little bit so that we can keep the order of things. I've asked Joel Brooks to be the lead presenter. Joel grew up in the Okanagan and spent his summers working in local tree fruit orchards and packing operations. He's now the marketing communications specialist at Okanagan Specialty Fruits, a grower-led biotechnology company based in Summerland that has developed the non-browning Arctic apple. Robert Wager has been a member of the biology department at Vancouver Island University for the past 18 years. He has a BSc in microbiology and a master's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. An independent scientist, Robert is passionate about providing accurate, fact-based information for the sake of education rather than compensation. Dr. Thierry Vrain grew up in France, and after moving to Canada, he graduated from North Carolina State University with a PhD in plant pathology. And during his 30-year career as a soil biologist and genetic engineer, Dr. Vrain worked for Agriculture Canada, where he managed research programs, provided leadership for scientific committees and organizations. evaluated scientific manuscripts, and provided technical expertise to governments and universities in Canada and abroad. Kent Mullenix is the Director of Sustainable Agriculture and Food Security at Kwantlen Polytechnic University's Institute for Sustainable Food Systems. Before joining Kwantlen, Kent held the endowed joint chair in pomology and was an associate professor in the Department of Horticulture and Landscape Architecture at Washington State University, and at the same time he was professor and director of agriculture programs at Wenatchee Valley College. Kent is a horticulture research specialist. Fruit and nut crops are his specialty, and his areas of scholarly work include development of ecologically sound, human-intensive horticulture, food crop production methods, the development of bioregional agri-food systems, and family-based agriculture revitalization is a critical element of sustainable agriculture and community. I work with Kent, so there's a disclosure there, but my role tonight is neither advocate nor opponent of the proposition. I am an urban geographer by background, an educator by training, and a facilitator by co-option. My aim is to try to keep the debate focused on the relationship between biotechnology and sustainability. I want it to be on ideas, not on individuals. And my hope is that everyone here will be open to questioning their assumptions about the best approach to ensuring the sustainability of agriculture. So with that, I'd like to invite our panelists to come, and if Dr. Mullenix is not in the room, we will continue apace. Just while the presenters are getting ready, in the background work I was doing, there were a couple of areas that provided some statistics and maps and diagrams about the current state of affairs, and they're confusing. In this particular instance, it shows that there are 28 biotech crop countries on the planet, but the FAO recently produced a document that limited actually the distribution to a lesser geographic distribution. It's a horrible slide. I couldn't do anything about the background, but it's an attempt to provide both information about the pros and cons of the issues. And I will have 3 questions, as I mentioned, afterwards. So if I can now turn it over to Joel, and if Detra is there, if we can move to Joel's presentation. And a big vote of thanks to Detra for stick handling these various presentations and keeping it all in sequence. Thank you very much. Joel, I'm going to keep the time.
Sure, absolutely. So first I want to just thank everyone, especially Joanne and the organizers of Fresh Outlook, for giving us the opportunity to come and share our side. It is so important to have both sides of the argument. And I want to start, before I get into anything specific with the Arctic apple, by just telling you a little bit about our company, Okanagan Specialty Fruits. And so we are a small grower-led biotech company, not a corporation. In fact, I want to stress that a lot of people have the opinion that biotech corporations are all giant, multi-million-dollar corporations that are out to take over the food supply. Every employee we have is on that screen before you now. And another point that's important to emphasize is that most of our shareholders are members of the BC agriculture industry. Many of them are fruit growers themselves or packers. I myself had my first job sorting cherries and working on apple orchards. And most of all, our president and founder, Neil Carter, I haven't met anyone who is as passionate about agriculture or tree fruit as he is. He's been a grower in Okanagan for 2 decades now with his family, and he's also been a bioresource engineer, and he's worked in over 50 countries across the world, most of them in the developing world, on food security projects, including increasing yields and getting them access to fresh water. And it was through this experience that he became persuaded of the value that agricultural biotechnology can offer the world. And to get into the Arctic apple in particular, as most of you know, it's a non-browning apple, so you can see that the slices don't brown when they're exposed to oxygen. It won't brown when you take a bite, or even the juice won't brown. And we've heard that there's already low browning apples, so why do you need a non-browning apple with biotech? And it's important to make a distinction there because there are low browning varieties out there, but generally they're lower browning because they have a lower phenolic content. And the phenolics in an apple are responsible for things like the aroma and the taste and even the nutrition. So most of the low browning varieties out there just aren't the same at all. And in addition to that, Arctic apples can make any apple non-browning. So we've started with Arctic Granny and Arctic Golden. We've got Arctic Fuji and Arctic Gala, and we've been approached by many other growers who want us to make their variety non-browning as well. And so what do they grow like? Do we inject them with something or anything like that? No, it's not the case at all. They actually grow in the orchard just the same as any other apple. They respond to pests just the same. They grow at the same rate. They require the same inputs. We've had field trials for over a decade in Washington State and for over 8 years in New York State. And they've been managed by third-party horticultural experts, and they've proved this. And it's really just when the apple is bitten, sliced, or bruised that you see any difference at all. And so why did we develop a non-browning apple in the first place? A lot of people think it sounds trivial, but it's really not, because you can see the blue line shows that apple consumption has been declining for 2 decades, and that's even while fresh fruit consumption as a whole has been increasing. And why is this the case? Well, there's no new markets for apples lately. People want more convenience, and nowhere is that more clear than in the baby carrot example. Now, baby carrots effectively doubled carrot consumption since the early 90s. And why is that? There's nothing special about a baby carrot that a regular carrot doesn't have, other than the fact that it's small, it's bite-sized, you can throw it into lunch. People will grab that instead of a bag of chips if they're looking for a healthy option. And so currently, 1.7% of apples are sold as pre-sliced, fresh-cut products. And that's a huge market opportunity because that's such a tiny percentage. And there's so few apples sold into areas like food service that the number isn't even tracked. So things like school cafeterias and airplanes, it's a huge potential for people to eat more apples. And for growers in the Okanagan, they can improve their bottom lines. As somebody who grew up in the Okanagan myself, I've seen lots of orchards being torn down over the past couple of decades to make room for all sorts of things that I'd prefer to see an apple orchard there myself. And so how did we do this? Well, it's relatively simple science compared to most of the biotech crops out there, but that being said, it still is molecular biology. So in layman's terms, what we've done is we silenced the gene polyphenol oxidase that drives the browning reaction. And if you think about it in terms of the DNA sequence is across Canada railway track, what we've effectively done is replaced a few feet long of that track with a nearly identical track. We do this using apple genes, and there's no new proteins in the apple that aren't in every other apple. And so the industry interest that we found has been quite strong, and we had surveyed over 40 of the industry leaders, and over 75% had a positive impression of Arctic apples. And some people who've been looking at the news may be saying, oh, but I read the BC Fruit Growers Association is against the Arctic apple, as are a few of the other associations. And that's true, but as you can see, the main concern that growers had isn't about the fruit itself, it's about the fact that there are consumer concerns about the Arctic apple or about GMOs in general. And that's true, there's a lot of misinformation about GMOs, and that's why it's important to have these sorts of discussions where both sides can be debated. But it's clear that the majority of apple industry members think that the Arctic apple itself is a positive thing. And why do they think this? Because it offers benefits throughout the supply chain. So starting at the grower and the packer level, so many apples are wasted along the way because they're being picked and they're grabbed a bit too hard. They're bouncing around in the packing line and they get a few little scuffs that don't really have any impact on the quality of the fruit, but they still get thrown away as a result. It can open up the door to new product innovations, such as I mentioned fresh cut and pre-sliced apples. Things like non-browning, variety-specific juice is a big one. It decreases shrink at retail. It increases convenience for consumers. And it contributes to sustainability. And so apples are one of the most wasted foods in the entire world. About half of the apples produced are never consumed. And in addition to this, we think that consumers will be able to better tell when an apple should be thrown away or shouldn't be, because the Arctic apple can give more information on the true quality of the fruit. And that's because an Arctic apple will still rot and decompose just the same as any other apple. If it has bacteria or a fungal infection, if it's old, it'll rot just the same, but it won't go brown if it's just exposed to oxygen. And so if you see an Arctic apple that has browning or discoloration, you know it has meaningful damage, whereas with a conventional apple, you wouldn't really be able to tell in most circumstances. And this can be the tip of the iceberg because there's lots of other projects that can also increase the sustainability of tree fruits. So for instance, we can reduce we can increase the pest resistance of apples, which can reduce the amount of pesticides needed to be sprayed. This can help out growers, it can increase consumer confidence, it can reduce the impact on the environment, and that's just in addition to things that the non-browning trade can help with, such as food waste. And so boosting apple consumption is also a major part of the sustainability push because it's about the sustainability of our health. About 30% of the population is obese right now, and that's because people are going to convenient foods like chips, like a chocolate bar. It's quick, you grab it, you put it in the lunch, and so we want to make apple slices more convenient. And so we know people will be interested in this because we asked them. We asked 1,000 self-identified apple eaters if they'd be more likely to get a non-browning biotech pre-sliced apple over top of an anti-browning treated apple. And 2/3 said they would be more interested in the biotech apple. And in general, we also asked the same group, just would you be interested in buying a biotech non-browning apple? And the majority said yes. We gave them a little bit more information, such as the fact that there's no new proteins in the Arctic apple that aren't in any other apple, and the fact that they were developed by a grower-led organization. That number increased even further to the point where 3 times as many people, after getting this information, were interested in buying Arctic apples compared to those who weren't. And so our labeling policy is a key part of what we do because we have a major commitment to having transparency and having open communication. And every Arctic apple will have an Arctic apple label. Every box, every processed product will have the Arctic apple label. We know people are going to be looking for them. We know people are going to be wanting more information about them. We're planning to have things like brochures at the point of sale so people can learn more as they're buying them. We want people to go check out our website. We want people to learn more about them because they're the most tested apple in the history of the world. And if you take a look at the regulatory process, you can see how rigorous it is. For a company with 7 people led by an orchardist, it's a huge undertaking. We're founded in 1996, and so it takes nearly 2 decades for us to get our very first project to market. And that involves the 10+ years of field trials that I mentioned, and it really is an incredibly rigorous process. We've got hundreds of pages of assessments online that anybody can see. It's all publicly available. We want you to come. We want you to check out our website. We want you to let us know if you have any questions. That's why we're here today, to answer any questions or concerns. I can tell you right now, we don't have any safety concerns at all. I have an Arctic apple slice right here in front of me, and I can tell you, we've had the orchards for 10 years, and we don't have any concern whatsoever, and we know that you shouldn't either. Thank you.
And well within the 10 minutes. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I have heard that Kent Mullenix has landed, but he hasn't yet made the back of the room. So with your permission, I'm going to ask Robert if he would do his presentation, by which time I hope that Kent will be here and we can do the other side of it. So Robert, if you would.
Thank you, Joanne, and all of you for coming and having me here to speak about what is known about the science of GM crops for food. I've been involved with this area of research for about 13, 14 years. We all know the problem. We've got 1 billion people on the planet today who go to bed hungry. We've got another 1 billion people on top of that who don't get proper nutrition, whether it's vitamins or micronutrients. If we add to that the 2 billion people that are coming in the coming decades, most of those in the developing world, the global agricultural output has significant challenges that must be met. Everybody in this room is quite well familiar that North American farmers have adopted GM crops overwhelmingly in the commodity crop region. Other parts of the world have also adopted certain GM crops very well. In India, for example, the first GM cotton was commercialized in 2002. If you jump ahead today, there's a 24% yield increase per acre in the GM crops. The small farmers get 50% more